Good day. I am Nemis, second year microbiology. My topic in general ecology subject is what are the major components of an ecosystem. Ecosystem living and non-living components includes living organisms like plants, animals, insects, and bacteria, as well as non-living components like rocks, soil, water, and sunlight. Survival of the living organism in an ecosystem depends upon their adaptability to both the living and non-living elements within its community. The living components. The living creatures in a biological community include microscopic living organisms to all classes and sizes of animals. Example: living organisms range in size from the algae and zooplankton in a drop of pond water to the larger fish, amphibians, lilies, and cattles that make their homes in the pond. All the different population of species coexisting and thriving within the same environment define the inhabitants of an ecosystem. The ecosystem cycle encompasses the producers, consumers, and decomposers, who cycle energy through the food web, and there is constant productivity, decomposition, and nutrient cycling. The non-living components. The non-living things in an ecosystem created and define the ecosystem environment and include sunlight, temperature, weather, precipitation, soil chemistry, water, and base nutrient supply. These non-living components remain vital to the ecosystem health because they are the keystone in its energy flow and nutrient cycle. Energy from sunlight transforms into chemical energy through photosynthesis by plants, which define the base producer in the ecosystem. Essential nutrients, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. These are necessary for the biochemical processes of life that are obtained from the surrounding atmosphere, soil, water, and the physical environment. Biotic and abiotic relationship. Biotic factors are non-living parts of an environment. These include things such as sunlight, temperature, wind, soil, and naturally occurring events such as storm, fires, and volcanic eruption. Biotic factors are the living parts of an environment such as plants, animals, and microorganisms. Range of tolerance for a population of organisms. Tolerance is the ability of organisms to withstand a variety of environmental conditions. The continuous survival of any organism depends upon a specific set of conditions in the surrounding. There are extremes of tolerance set of every organism. According to the law of tolerance, organisms live within a range between too much and too little. Organism-wide ranges of tolerance for most factors are therefore likely to be distributed. The law of tolerance states that the existence, abundance, and distribution of species in an ecosystem are determined by whether the level of one or more physical or chemical factors fall above or below the levels tolerated by the species. A typical example of tolerance is a estuary, a biome or ecological region where river and stream water merge with the salty. In this area, there is a periodic rise and fall of sea and river tides, especially during storm, causing great fluctuation in salinity of the water. Worms, fishes, clams, and barnacles lived in the water will survive because of the wide tolerance. Deeper marine species of corals, sea urchins, sponges, and some species would not survive because of narrow tolerance to salinity. Abiotic factor that limits population growth. Limiting factor is anything that constrains a population size and slows or stops it from growing. Temperature. The tilting of Earth's axis contributes to the unequal temperature over Earth's surface. Temperature varies from the region to region at the given time because the rays of the sun strike the Earth at different angles. Organisms must cope up with the changes in temperature to survive. Coping sometimes means entering a period of inactivity called the dormant stage. Some animals cope with temperature changes by moving out of a place or area. Example, bird migration. In colder months, some plants as well as animals became inactive and hibernate. Hibernation is dormancy during winter. Estivation is a period of summer activity. Soil. Soil lies in a thin layer on the surface of the bedrock of the earth. It is formed mostly from weathering of rocks and minerals and erosion by running water, wind, and other forces of nature. Soil varies in different localities according to the kind of plant and animal life it supports. Water. It makes up 3/4 of the Earth and it is the habitat of most organisms. It is essential to life because many chemical reactions in the body of organisms take place in water solutions. Light. Light is a limiting factor to terrestrial organisms. Green plants need sunlight for photosynthesis. Light conditions vary from place to place and organisms differ in the amount of light they need. Some plants thrive in this area are ferns and mosses. Some animals may be snails, toads, salamanders, and snakes. More common plants like grasses, shrubs, and trees, which need full sunlight, thrive in open field, mountains, slopes, desert, and other exposed places. Atmosphere. Living things need air. With the exception of anaerobic bacteria and few organisms, all living things must obtain atmospheric oxygen for life. Land dwellers obtain oxygen directly from the atmosphere. Water dwellers obtain their supply from the oxygen dissolved in the water where they live. Topography. The physical feature of the Earth. Changes in the Earth's physical features are brought about by erosion, volcanic eruption, earthquake, and flood. Due to these changes, environmental conditions change affecting the survival of plants and animals present in the area. They may survive, migrate, perish, or be replaced by another organism suited to the prevailing conditions. Living component of ecosystem. Trophic level. A particular position occupied by a group of organisms in a food chain. Primary producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, or tertiary consumer. Food chain. A food chain is a sequence of organisms through which nutrients and energy pass as one organism eats another. Food web. Food web is a complex network of food chains. Generally, living organism depends on several or many food sources. They interact with each other in many ways, not only by a single food chain. Hence, food web has many interconnected food chains. Energy enters the most ecosystem from sunlight. It is used by some organisms in the ecosystem to make food. Some ecosystems, such as hydrothermal vent ecosystem at the bottom of the ocean, receive no sunlight and obtain energy by some organisms in the ecosystem to make food. These organisms are called primary producers or autotrophs, which include small plants, algae, photosynthetic prokaryotes, and chemosynthetic prokaryotes. Producer are organisms that produce organic compounds from energy and simple inorganic molecules, also called as autotrophs, which literally means self-nutrition. Autotrophs, also known as primary producer, that can fix inorganic carbon as an energy source. Most plants are autotrophs. Autotrophs are a vital part of all ecosystem. The stability of the producer is vital to the survival of every ecosystem. They take energy and material from a biotic environment and use that to take organic compound. Photoautotrophs are organisms that use energy from sunlight to make food by photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process by which carbon dioxide and water are converted to glucose and oxygen using sunlight for energy. Photoautotrophs and ecosystem where they are found. Types of photoautotrophs. Plants. Example, trees, grasses. Type of ecosystem, terrestrial. Types of photoautotrophs. Algae, diatoms, seaweeds. Type of ecosystem is aquatic. Type of photoautotrophs. Bacteria. Example, cyanobacteria, purple bacteria. Type of ecosystem, aquatic terrestrial. Plants are the most important photoautotrophs in land-based or terrestrial ecosystem. Plants include organisms such as trees, grasses, mosses, and fern. Algae are photoautotrophs found in ecosystem, but they generally are more important in water-based or aquatic ecosystem. Algae include single-celled eukaryotes such as diatoms as well as multicellular eukaryotes such as seaweeds. Photoautotrophic bacteria called cyanobacteria are also important producers in aquatic ecosystem. Chemoautotrophs. In some places where life is found on Earth, there is not enough light to provide energy for photosynthesis. In these places, producers called chemoautotrophs use the energy stored in chemical compound to make organic molecule by chemosynthesis. Chemosynthesis is the process by which carbon dioxide and water are converted to carbohydrates. Include archaea. Archaea is a domain of microorganisms that resemble bacteria. Most of it lives in extreme environments such as hydrothermal vents in the deep ocean. Near the vent, archaea cover the seafloor or live in or the bodies of other organisms such as tube worms. In this ecosystem, archaea use the toxic chemical released from the vent to produce organic compounds. Example, red tube worms, each containing millions of archaea microorganisms, grow in a cluster around a hydrothermal vent in a deep ocean floor. Archaea produce food for themselves by chemosynthesis. Consumer. Consumer is a category that belongs within the food chain of an ecosystem. It refers predominantly to animals. Consumers are unable to make their own energy and instead rely on the consumption and digestion of producers or other consumers or both to survive. There are 4 types of consumers: herbivores, omnivores, carnivores, and decomposers. Herbivores. Herbivores are animals whose primary food source is plant-based. Includes vertebrates like deer, koalas, and some bird species, as well as invertebrates such as crickets and caterpillars. These animals have evolved digestive system capable of handling large amounts of plant material. Carnivores. Carnivores are animals that eat other animals. The word carnivore is derived from Latin and literally means meat eater. They generally have lithe, powerful bodies and powerful jaws. Their feet each have 4 or 5 toes equipped with sharp claws. Most are completely carnivorous and eat only meat. Omnivores. An omnivore animal is one that eats both plants and animals, which may include egg, insects, fungi, meat, and algae. Example of omnivorous animals are bears, humans, chicken, and insects like cockroaches. Decomposers. A decomposers is an organism that decomposes or breaks down organic material such as remains of dead organism. Decomposers include bacteria and fungi. These organisms carry out the process of decomposition which all living organisms undergo after death. Heterotrophs. A heterotroph is an organism that cannot manufacture its own food by carbon fixation and therefore derive its intake of nutrition from other sources of organic carbon, mainly plant or animal matter, in the food chain. Heterotrophs are secondary and tertiary consumers. Primary consumers. A primary consumer is an organic that feeds on primary producer. Primary consumers are usually herbivores that feed on autotrophic plants which produce their own food through photosynthesis. Secondary consumers. Secondary consumers are the third link of a food chain. They can be either omnivores or carnivores. Third and higher level consumers are carnivores who eat primary and secondary consumers. Detritus feeder. A detrivore is a heterotrophic organism which obtains its nutrition by feeding on detritus. Detritus is the organic matter that made up of dead plant and animal materials. Again, an ecosystem is a functional unit composed of abiotic and biotic components through which nutrients are cycled and energy flows. The limiting factor in an environment is anything that is essential to an organism and for which there is competition. Tolerance is the ability of organisms to withstand a variety of environmental conditions. Organisms that produce the nutrients that they need are producer or autotrophs. Organisms that get their nutrients by consuming other organisms are called consumers or heterotrophs, and some recycle nutrients back to producers by decomposing the waste and remains of organisms are called decomposers and detrivores. That's all. Thank you and God bless.